All right, everyone. Just to open up our show, we would like to take a second to apologize if we upset anyone with our last episode. We talked about some really controversial subjects, and most controversial among them was Nick's frankly reckless statement that curling isn't a sport. And so we received numerous complaints, a few death threats, and a really nice home-baked cake in response to Nick's controversial comments. So, Nick, would you like to address this controversy?
Yes, I do, because I want it all to be known right now. The official position of A Mouthful of History, at least from the host anyway, is that curling is not a sport, and so Corey, shut the fuck up, okay? Okay? It's not. Actually, you know what's funny? I never really cared about this topic at all, and then I had a friend in high school who, if you brought up curling to him, he would go crazy. Like, that's not a sport. Real people don't spend all their life training to be curlers, and if they do, they wasted their fucking life.
Who was this?
This is a guy who was a year older than we were.
Huh. Well,
Takes skill to like broom like that quick though. That's like that
Yeah,
takes
my-
some,
my
that
rule
takes
of-
some.
My rule of thumb is any sport where the Canadians can dominate isn't a real sport.
So hockey's not a real sport.
No.
damn,
Hey,
that
that's-
it just keeps getting more
Hey,
controversial,
hey.
folks.
So Nick has a thing against curling and a thing against Canadians being good at something.
Actually, I actually do enjoy hockey when I watch. I don't watch hockey all the time. It's the sport I watch probably the least of the major team sports. But when I watch hockey, it's really fun. But yeah, no. This is I'm taking a firm stance against Canadians being good at anything.
Nick just cannot say anything uncontroversial, folks. He is our firebrand.
They fucking elected a frat boy to be their prime minister. And I know. We have a fucking game show host as ours, and that's bad. But honestly, at least Trump is evil, and you can see it on the outside. Fucking, what's their prime minister's name?
Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau is a douchebag, and you can tell from the minute you look at him. He's just a slimy piece of shit.
Oh, wait, sorry. Breaking news. It looks like Justin Trudeau has been caught in his 157th blackface scandal.
And people like that. There of all the political figures on the planet, he is one of the two I don't understand the love for. Like, everybody seems to love him. I don't understand it.
'Cause he's a young, good-looking guy.
The other one is Angela Merkel. I don't understand. Like, even like people here in America who are left wing like Angela Merkel.
That
Like,
one gets me. Because Trudeau, I get it in a shallow way because, like Cameron said, I mean, he is young and charming and shit like that. But Merkel is just the blandest center-right, boring, hasn't done anything that great as a politician ever sort of character that I also just don't get it.
I know like Merkel's been in the news a lot, and like I know that Merkel's like Chancellor of Germany and stuff like that, but it's just like I don't know much about like the position, not the positions she holds, but what she's like done really. So it's like I understand like the political spectrum in Europe is a little bit different than the United States. Like we see like I think she's like not a true moderate, but I think she's like
She's probably like one of our center Democrats.
a little. It's like center left Democrat, and like then there's like like an equivalent.
Well, she's part of their center right party though, so I think.
But
like,
yeah, but the thing is,
center-
it's like center-ish, like teetering
Yeah.
closer to the left because like our political spectrum is fucking skewed. Like it's going further and further right.
like in a normal world, Angela Merkel is what you want the Republicans to be, like a sane version of the Republican Party. One where we could actually argue about tax structure and that stuff like that. But of course, we don't live in a normal country. We live in a crumbling empire. So
Yeah, I mean, we do have that party that you just described. They're just the Democrats.
basically, yeah. But the Democrats are a center-right party. At best, the Democrats are a center party, and a few of them are of the left. But just to give you an idea of how fucking weak the left is in our country, most of our radical left-wing politicians would barely be centrist in other sane countries.
Yeah, they're just like social Democrats. And then, of course, our Republicans are just like constantly aggrieved, unhinged howler monkeys.
So here is where I stand. Curling's not a sport. Hockey's fine. I wish Canada wasn't so good. And fuck Angela Merkel.
Fuck Angela Merkel. God, just one spicy take after another.
It's Tabasco in the eyes, spicy.
Other than that, let's get back to punching people in the face for a living.
Yeah, let's get back to something civil, y'all.
All right. Welcome back to A Mouthful of History. I am your host, Nick Malott.
Nailed it.
I'm your host, Nicholas Malott. Joined with me, Cameron.
It's nice that you got your name right.
I didn't think that of all the things I was going to mess up in these podcasts, my name was going to be the one.
But I'm good.
And David.
What's poppin', y'all?
I think the problem is I normally introduce myself as Nicholas Malott, and I, for some reason, just went with Nick this time.
This soothing voice, but firebrand controversial dude.
Come at me, bros, If you have a problem with it, email me at amouthfulofhistory@gmail.com, and I'll put it in my don't give a fuck box.
Actually, just remember, everyone, if you have any problems with the show and have any problems with anything any of us say, remember to privately message Nick. Even if you're like mad at something that Cameron or I did, make sure that you message Nick. I can also give you his phone number after the show so you can call him.
You know what? Fine. You have a problem with something I say? You can DM me at Nick_Malott on Twitter. Come at me.
Oh, wow. I was just joking, but man.
Not come on you.
I don't think Caroline would appreciate that.
Yeah, probably not. For folks listening, sorry to break your hearts, but Nicholas Malott is married.
And David, you are a soon-to-be...
Cameron's the only real eligible bachelor on the show.
It's true.
We're actually planning for a 1-year anniversary, a special bachelor edition of A Mouthful of History. We're trying to get him a long-term girlfriend.
Was it 90 Day Fiance?
We found this really nice girl from Russia, Cameron. We think you're really going to like her.
I hope her name's Svetlana.
It's actually Natasha.
It's still good.
All right, cool.
All right, David, do you want to reintroduce us to the topic?
Yeah, so this is just part 2 in our 2-part series about a few selected boxing heavyweight champions. And again, this is just sort of to talk about these champions, not just as boxers, but as historical figures. Last time we talked about Jack Johnson, we talked about Joe Louis and Max Schmeling. And so now I would like to talk about Floyd Patterson, and also the man who came after him, Sonny Liston, because they have a really kind of interesting and interconnected story, or at least stories that have some overlaps, but also some very different things as well. And what I mean by that is going to make sense in a moment. So,
and if you listen to the previous episode, we like parallel storytelling.
Oh, yes.
We like intersectional character arcs.
Yeah, baby. So, Floyd Patterson. He was born January 4th, 1935, as one of 11 children.
God damn it. I am one of 4, and I thought that was too much.
Yeah, that sounds like way too much.
Was it an Irish family?
For Patterson?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. But who knows? I mean, maybe they're part Irish.
Isn't it the joke back then, like Irish had a lot of kids because
It's
they're
mostly
Catholic?
the Catholic stuff. The Catholics, It's just in their doctrine to, have as many kids as possible.
So Patterson was born January 4th, 1935, in Waco, North Carolina, to a father who worked on the railroad and a mother who stayed at home. So one thing that we talked about in the last episode that Cameron brought up was the Great Migration, where a lot of black folks in the South moved to the North thinking that there would be better opportunities and less racism, which, for the opportunities, kind of, but not really. Less racism, definitely not.
Just a different kind of racism.
Basically. So
let's say if you were in that situation, would you rather have the overt racism constantly hounding at you, or would you rather have the kind of covert racism?
Hard to know.
Having not been in that situation, I don't know.
Me neither.
Yeah, that is a rhetorical question for us. And so they moved to Brooklyn, New York, where they, as one of Patterson's biographers put it, traded rural poverty for urban poverty. When Floyd was a kid, he had really severe self-esteem issues. He would even point to pictures of himself and say, "I don't like that boy," while running away to be alone by himself.
Why?
There's no root cause that's ever really been found out. He just had those self-esteem issues for some reason. One thing, though, that might have been part of it is living in that sort of poverty. He was always self-conscious or felt bad about not being able to help his family. His dad worked really, really hard, and Floyd really looked up to him for that. But, they just barely were getting by.
So you feel like you should have contributed way more than like he was doing at the moment.
Exactly. And I feel like there probably was some other things, because I'm sure plenty of kids feel that way but don't have quite the level of self-esteem issue that he had. So there's probably some other things, but the stuff that I've read about it makes it sound like there isn't like a well understood explanation as to why.
Yeah.
But the family moved around a lot within New York because of trying to find employment and not being able to stay in one housing area for too long because of trying to get by, basically.
Tale as old as time.
Basically, right? And so he didn't do very well academically or socially. He was very shy. He didn't talk to people. He didn't really learn how to read and write that well. And even on the rare occasion where he would like know the right answer in like a classroom discussion, he just never raised his hand.
You know, side note real quick, we're talking about a boxer. It's kind of weird to me that whenever we get like really socially awkward kids, our first instinct is that, hey, we're going to throw you in a situation where you get to punch people for all you want.
I know, right? That can only end well. I mean, in his case it did. But generally speaking, you know. So with the combination of feeling guilty about not being able to contribute to his household, and also with just his, social awkwardness, we'll say, not fitting in, not doing well academically, he started skipping school. And then he started stealing to help his family. There was one time where he saw these ladies wearing really nice dresses, and he thought about his mom, who in his eyes worked 10 times harder than these women. And he really wanted to get her a dress, but he didn't obviously have the money for it. So he broke into a place and stole it, gave it to his mom. And when she asked where he got it from, he said that I found it. So he starts getting into this life of truancy and skipping school. And eventually he starts getting caught, and he starts kind of going into the juvenile justice system. But, and this is a really interesting story, and this is where his story will diverge from our next person. In September of 1945, he was caught for theft. But instead of being sent to prison, he is sent to the Wiltwyck School for Boys, which was an institution in the green part of upstate New York that gave boys open space, fresh air, woods that you can kind of like hike and explore, and teachers who were dedicated to their well-being.
So basically, instead of punishing him like we like to do, they found a way to take these kids who have a hard time acclimating to society, the open space and care that they need to become contributing members of society.
Exactly.
Wow. Who could have seen that as a positive?
Right? And by the way, side note, he was 10 years old at this time, and, other kids his age were being thrown into like juvie and sometimes jail if the crime was considered severe enough, and of course if they were black enough, because that wasn't happening to white kids.
Well, probably considering his age, like 10 years old, they didn't want to throw him into juvenile hall. Like,
well, he could have been thrown into juvenile hall. He just got really lucky.
He could have been, but yeah, got lucky. And the fact that he was probably 10 years old too, like, probably contributed to this decision. You know what I mean?
Well, a
like,
lot of like 10-year-olds were being sent to juvie like at the time.
I know, but like that could have been like
that could have been part of it.
A kicker, and then like.
So in addition to having all this space and having these teachers who are really dedicated to their students, and also, by the way, teachers who are very well paid and had impressive backgrounds, because when you pay a teacher well and give them like small class sizes, they're going to enjoy that. So in addition to that, every cottage that the students lived in had a counselor and a trained social worker, not for the entire student body, but again, for every individual cottage.
Talk about like, high quality tentative care.
Yeah.
And a cottage too. Like,
exactly.
I mean, I don't picture like a high quality cottage, but like the term cottage, like, wow, these kids are getting like really good at that point. Really good.
Right? So, yeah. And then they have small class sizes. And so basically, like Nick was saying, you're trying to support these kids and help them and give them a positive environment instead of just punishing.
There's so much you can do with kids who our current system basically wants to put all kids in a, I know this is different because this is in the 1940s, but this still relates to today. We try to put all kids into like this box. They have to be educated the same way. They have to be brought up the same way. Everything has to be, but it doesn't work that way because we all learn differently. I know that personally. I'm a good memory guy. So I can read things, I can pick it up, and I can retain it for long periods of time. Not everybody learns that way. So, like, let's say, David, if you're more of a learn by doing person, just as an example, then you need to be put in a situation to boost that. And, Cameron, if you're more of a
Abstract reasoning,
yeah.
let's say.
Then you have to do that. But we don't do that. We just try to fit everybody into this bubble, and that fails a lot of kids.
Exactly, yeah. And going off of that, if you have smaller class sizes, then you can take a little bit more time to make sure that Nick Jr. is getting the methodology he needs. Cameron Jr. is getting his, the teacher can find the approach that works for Cameron Jr. Same thing for David Jr., right? And so...
We're so narcissistic. We all named our kids after ourselves.
Do I even want kids?
I need there to,
why are you making me think about this?
I need there to be little Camerons running around at some point for my master plan, but that's for another episode.
Enough for your own soccer team.
Oh,
that's probably too many.
I mean, if I want to be like Jose Mourinho.
And so, surprise, surprise, apparently when you treat children like human beings and give them a supportive, nurturing environment, they generally do very well. Now, it should be said that Wiltwyck didn't have like a 100% success rate because nothing ever will, but it helped an incredible amount of its students, including Floyd Patterson. Floyd took so well to this school, Wiltwyck. There's actually one story of, in class, him knowing the answer to a question, but him being shy. The teacher calls on someone else because Floyd didn't raise his hand. That kid got the answer right. Floyd realized he had the right answer. He ran out of the room upset because he knew the right answer, and he was very upset at himself for not saying it. And so because the teacher had such a small class size, and because it was such an otherwise like comfortable environment for everyone, she was able to go after him, comfort him, and then bring him back into the classroom, which you couldn't do that shit at a public school today.
Yeah.
We were doing a team exercise, and I got the question wrong. The two kids got mad at me. They actually jumped over the table and started punching me.
Jeez.
And the teacher watched all this and did nothing. Actually, I got in trouble for
that. Jesus.
That is to say that, yeah, I love public schools, and I think they're great, but they're so ill-equipped to handle.
Yeah, they're stretched very thin and... Underfunded, teachers are underpaid, and sometimes when teachers are underpaid, their initial spark of wanting to make a difference in their student lives just gets grounded away.
When I started college, I wanted to be a teacher, and it took me a year after being out of high school to realize, gosh, why do I want to do that to myself?
Yeah.
I had a student teach, and I realized like halfway in, I'm like, this ain't cut out for me, you know what I mean?
That's why I'm trying to do higher ed, man, because yeah, K through 12, it's rough what they put on you.
Well, it's like, it's one thing to know it and one thing to teach it. Like I think that the way teaching in like public school is, I just think it didn't work for me. It was always like, oh, you stick it out, see where like, you might be good. I said like, where do I see myself in 5 years? And I just didn't see myself in public education. So still trying to figure out what I want to do next.
Yeah. That classic question.
Yeah.
We're going to get crazy and turn this into a big rant about the state of the education system. We better move on.
Yeah. So basically, surprise, surprise, when you put students in an environment where, their teachers can pay attention to them and they have support in the form of counselors, social workers, all that, they do well. And Floyd Patterson did exceptionally well. He did so well that he not only grew close with his teachers and also the person who ran the school, he actually became friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, I know, right? So Eleanor Roosevelt was actually the person who made this school happen. She had to fight tooth and nail to make sure that Wiltwyck got funding to be able to provide these services.
Side note, Eleanor Roosevelt is one of the unsung heroes of American history.
Amazing.
I mean,
she was ahead of her time on basically everything.
Yep.
It's not too bad at all if you're impressing Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah, and so Floyd Patterson became friends with her. She was a sort of mentor to him. So Floyd, again, just did very, very well. He learned to not only read and write, but he basically caught up to his grade level, even though he was only there for 2 years, from 10 years old to 12 years old. And he just flourished there. He also learned how to box, and that's how he got started. He left Wiltwyck again at age 12, just completely transformed, completely turned a new leaf, and got into boxing. I'm not going to go into his career too much, but it is worth noting that he became the youngest heavyweight boxing champion ever at age 21 in 1956. Funny kind of side note to that, the person who would beat his record, Mike Tyson, becoming the heavyweight champion at 20 in 1986, had the same coach as Floyd. They both had Cus D'Amato as their coach.
That's crazy, but I guess, talent recognizes talent.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was an amazing coach.
I mean, I guess Freddie Roach wasn't alive.
Yeah, or might have been alive but super young.
Super young.
Having a baby coach might be adorable, but probably not super effective.
I'm going to assume, though, that there's a stark contrast between the upbringing of this character and our next one.
Oh, yes. Yeah, which we'll get to in just a moment. So Patterson wins the heavyweight championship in 1956. He has the title for a few years. And then in 1960, a little bit before that, he loses to a Swedish boxer named Ingemar Johansson.
Johansson.
Yes. So he lost to him. In 1960, he has a rematch with Ingemar, and he wins by knockout. So then he became the first former heavyweight champion to regain the title. So youngest ever heavyweight champion, and then first to ever regain the title.
Which is great because the boxer we're going to talk about at the end of this episode is the first person to win the title 3 times.
Yep. And almost 4. Almost, but not quite. So as he is going through his career, we talked about the last episode, Joe Louis, who was considered, some people called him America's champion, specifically in the way saying that like everyone respected Joe Louis. Floyd Patterson was like that, but there was a difference because Floyd Patterson, unlike Joe Louis, openly came out in favor of civil rights. But he was such a nice guy that he actually was called the Gentleman of Boxing. I don't know if y'all see my shirt, but I'm wearing a Floyd Patterson shirt that says the Gentleman of Boxing.
I'm like today years old and seeing that. Like, I totally didn't realize you were wearing that.
I like that nickname. It's such a funny. It's because it's a sport where you're punching people in the face, but
It's like an oxymoron.
yeah, but you're the gentleman of boxing.
Yeah, when you're not getting punched by him, you just can't help but like the guy. And so he is speaking out in favor of civil rights. And in the last episode, I said that Jackie Robinson would be making an appearance, and this is where that comes in. So he actually went on a tour through Mississippi with Jackie Robinson to promote civil rights in 1962. Then, in May 1963, they went to Birmingham when shit was really going down. So he didn't just kind of make some statements. He actually went to the South, was just speaking in favor of civil rights. He was basically a darling among people who were in favor of civil rights and generally just liberals overall. He was backed by everyone from the NAACP to JFK to even like Frank Sinatra. So he had a really big fan base, really well loved, respected, and spoke in favor of civil rights. Between the trip to Mississippi, so after that trip, but before the Birmingham trip, Patterson lost the title in late 1962 to Sonny Liston.
Sonny Liston, one of the great characters in the history of boxing.
Yep. So Sonny Liston was born sometime between 1929 and 1932.
There's no birth certificate?
No birth certificate.
What?
There's actually, if you look up a lot of historical figures, especially around this time, especially in this particular era, you get a lot of, I think they're 30, but they might have been 32.
Which is totally true and is crazy because there are dated births of people from like ancient China because China just kept such good records and other societies did too. But the problem is in the rural South where a lot of people don't know how to read and write, records aren't being kept the same way. Whereas if you were born in like the city. So he was born sometime between 1929 to 1932-ish to sharecroppers in Arkansas. So he kind of came into a similar situation as Patterson.
If you're keeping track at home, that's our third character in these 2 episodes that are almost basically directly descended from the recent generation that ended slavery.
Yeah, and so, Liston and Patterson are kind of an extra generation removed from Jack Johnson. They're kind of the Joe Louis one, but a little later. But it's not that far. There are even still people who were alive during slavery that are still around during this time.
The last Civil War veteran didn't die until the late 1930s, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder when the last person died who had been around just during slavery.
Wikipedia has articles for that.
Damn. All right, we'll get back to you on that in a future post or something, listeners. So One of the differences, though, between Liston and Patterson was Sonny's father was abusive, horrendously so. In 1946, Sonny's mom left to St. Louis, Missouri, taking some of her 12 kids. So,
some of her 12 kids.
Patterson, one of 11, Liston, one of 12. So she took some of her 12 kids, but that did not include Liston. So Liston and some of his siblings were left with their father. So Sonny worked odd jobs until he could afford to run away and be with his mom. He eventually was able to, but it was kind of a messy process, as you can probably imagine. Once he got to St. Louis, he tried going to school, but he got mocked for being illiterate, so he dropped out and he turned to theft. Sound kind of familiar? Patterson didn't drop out, but,
Yeah, but I guess, obviously just quick. There's nobody coming in to save Liston from a life of crime.
Exactly. And so he basically went on the same path as Patterson, He started stealing to provide for him and his family. When he was arrested in 1950 for robbing a diner, he's quoted as saying, "At least I'm guaranteed 3 meals a day in prison." So that's the kind of life he was leading up to that point. That's what was in his world. Further contrasting with Patterson, not only did he not have a Wiltwick to help turn his life around, but whereas Patterson learned to box at Wiltwick, Liston learned to box in prison, which seems like a great place to teach and hold boxing matches.
I think Sean maybe in one of his Cracked articles said, then you're sent away because once prison teaches you how to fight, its job is done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, what else do you need to get from prison other than the ability to fuck someone up, right? So he gets out of prison and starts boxing, but because of his reputation, he can't turn to boxing in an honest way, because only people connected to the mob would finance his fighting career. He becomes a boxer, and as he does so, he is also becoming further and further entrenched with organized crime. He even became an enforcer because when you start out as a boxer, you don't really make that much money, and especially back then. So this gave Liston the sort of cultural image of the bad black man that was unfortunately kind of supplemented by his power in the ring, because this dude was fucking strong.
If I remember correctly, some of just the strongest punches ever.
Yeah, he is considered one of the strongest punchers to basically ever put on the gloves.
So if you went to a carnival punch meter, he would break the thing off like, bah,
he would hit it so hard that the bell would break out, do like a 50-foot arc in the air, land on the head of the guy operating the attraction, turn his mouth into piano keys, and make little birds fly above his head. That's Sonny Liston's power. He clearly figured out how to go Super Saiyan in the ring.
For our listeners, that was rated R. Oh man, very cartoonish. It's kind of like, Jack Johnson was seen as the womanizer, black boy man, but Sonny Liston was the hard man.
Exactly.
The hard black man into organized crime, the bad boy image. Both of them are very similar, but yet go to this image of what white Americans think that what a black person is.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of they're both at different points and they're coming towards the middle.
Yeah, they're basically coming toward that same point.
We're Joe Louis is the assimilation type.
Yeah, you kind of have Jack Johnson and Sonny Liston in very different ways.
Yeah.
Look down upon white society, but still ultimately looked down upon that way. And then, you have Floyd Patterson and Joe Louis, who are much more respected and loved. Again, especially Louis, he never alienated anyone by speaking up about human rights, because God forbid you take a stance in favor of your people's dignity the way Patterson did.
Yeah.
But with all that said, Liston had continuous run-ins with the law, making him both hated and feared. But he just kept winning, folks. He just kept winning.
He just kept winning.
And not just winning, but knocking people the hell out.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. I got money.
Hey, wait.
Can never get it.
Anymore, we're going to get copyrighted.
Right. So.
Yeah, you can't keep down skill. Eventually, it's just, there's a point when you're so good at something that no matter how hard someone tries to keep you from it, you just can't do anything about it.
Exactly. And even in boxing, where ducking constantly takes place, if there's just such a clear second best boxer in the world and everyone thinks that fight should happen, you just got to do it at some point. But that being said, because in boxing, fighters are able to choose whether or not to accept a fight. I mean, theoretically, you can do that in any sport, but boxers have a lot more power to do that in boxing.
In like single person combat sports, you can do that. Obviously, like if tomorrow the Dodgers said, "Oh, we don't want to play the Padres," for instance, like, well, sucks, bro. It's on the schedule.
Yeah, or even like with the UFC, like if Dana White calls and says, "Hey, John Jones, tomorrow you're fighting Thiago Santos, and if you don't take the fight, then we're not going to offer you more good fights that you want. So you got to play ball or not." But boxers, for a lot of complicated reasons, are a little bit more able to be choosy.
They're basically the definition of independent contractor.
Exactly. Yeah, as it is intended to work. Yeah. And so because of that, Patterson would have had the chance to really, if he wanted to, never fight Liston. And in fact, the NAACP, JFK, and a lot of those other people that I mentioned before told Patterson, do not take the fight. Don't even risk it, because, you know, he's champion in the late 50s, early 60s, and he is a civil rights icon in a way at this point. They don't want to risk that, especially, again, before this first Liston fight, he had gone to the South one time with Jackie Robinson.
They want the good, you can't see my quotation marks, they want the good black man to hold the title.
Exactly. They're just not happening with Liston. Fun fact, though, do you know who one of Liston's biggest advocates were? Floyd Patterson. Because he was the gentleman of boxing. And so Floyd Patterson said, look, Liston has served terms in prison. He's done his time as he's supposed to. He's no longer in prison. We don't have to treat him like a criminal. I'm going to accept the fight because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, God, Floyd.
Which, he's a gentleman of boxing, but, you know.
He got knocked out.
He got knocked out in the first round. And boxing rounds are not very long, by the way, folks. He got knocked out something like a minute in. It was rough.
So those sledgehammer gloves just
insane.
I don't want to say anything bad because Patterson could have said no, and he was right to take the fight, and he was right to everything he said was right. It just sucks that for somebody so good and so positive, and this has nothing to do with Sonny Liston, who earned his right to fight for the heavyweight championship.
Absolutely.
You still hate when like sports rewards douchebags.
Yeah.
Because douchebags, they just draw money. I'm sorry, they draw money.
Yeah, they do.
You don't want to see somebody who's so good and so nice lose like that. But unfortunately, there comes a point in every fighter's life when they're on the ground looking up at the lights.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
seeing stars.
Yep. By the way, here's a little anecdote. Fuck Frank Sinatra. Not on behalf of A Mouthful of History. This is just me. I, David Hollingsworth, am declaring beef with Frank Sinatra, and this is why. So Frank Sinatra was one of Patterson's biggest supporters, one of his biggest fans. They were quote-unquote friends. Gets knocked out by Sonny Liston, visits Frank Sinatra, goes to his office. He says to Frank, because I'm pretty sure Frank had said not to take the fight or something. Floyd says to Frank, I'm sorry I lost. Frank looks at him, walks to the other side of the office, just doesn't talk to him, just ignores him.
Wow.
That sucks, and that's awful.
Oh, and JFK did as well. He had an autographed picture of Floyd Patterson because, like I'd said, you know, he's a supporter. When he lost, he tossed the picture.
Imagine white America using black athletes as like a symbol, but then when they lose, it's like they just pull the plug.
Good thing that doesn't happen in the present.
It happens a lot in baseball with the Latino players. I know this like personally. Manny Machado, he's a third baseman for the Padres. Never really had a history of being like a bad guy, but he says one thing and suddenly the entire country turns on him.
Jeez, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not cool.
Or the whole unwritten rules thing.
Yeah, we could do an entire thing about the unwritten rules of baseball and how dumb they are, and how they're mostly used to keep down the exciting black and Latino players who bring flair to the sport, and how unwritten rules are done to keep them in line because white players are boring.
And so after that, Liston and Patterson had a rematch. And going into the fight, Patterson was saying he didn't feel fully on his game. He also was kind of a little distracted with some of the other stuff that he was doing, like the civil rights movement, tours and all that. So, you know, he felt like this one would be more of a fight. And it was more of a fight. It lasted 4 seconds longer.
Floyd, no.
And so Patterson lost the belt. He would remain a high-level boxer for a while after that, actually. Fun fact, Muhammad Ali, toward the end of his career, said the fighter with the best technique in the ring, basically the best boxer.
Pure boxer?
Yeah, like pure boxer they ever fought, was Patterson. But Patterson would never regain the title after that.
But doesn't Sonny Liston give us a nice segue into our final boxer of the night?
He does, but first, let's get to this epilogue because it is a heavy but I think worthwhile epilogue to look at. So, Liston as the heavyweight champion before he's knocked out by Ali. He was excited to turn his image around after he had got the championship. Because, again, as we've talked about multiple times, like this was still during an era when if you were the heavyweight boxing champion, you were like the man, basically.
Fast cars, fast money, fast meals.
Exactly. And even cultural significance. So the day after winning the championship, the first time, when he first knocked out Patterson, he boarded a plane to Philadelphia and he was with a friend who was also a reporter. He told this reporter friend, there's a lot of things I'm going to do, but one thing's very important. I want to reach my people. I want to reach them and tell them, you don't have to worry about me disgracing you. You won't have to worry about me stopping your progress. I want to go to colored churches and colored neighborhoods. I know it was in the papers that the better class of colored people were hoping I'd lose, praying even, because they were afraid I wouldn't know how to act. So it's like, the NAACP and all that. I don't mean to be saying I'm just going to be champion of my own people. It says now I'm the world's champion, and that's just the way it's going to be. I want to go to a lot of places, like orphan homes and reform schools. I'll be able to say, kid, I know it's tough for you, and it might even get tougher. But don't give up on the world. Good things can happen if you let them. Then he arrives at the airport, expecting a large crowd, hoping to start anew, really turn things around. Gets out of the plane, and there's no fans. There's only a press who doesn't like him and doesn't really want to be there. And so according to this reporter friend, these are the reporter friend's words, you could see Sonny literally deflate like a balloon with the air being let out. It was a good 45 seconds or minute before he finished taking in the whole scene, confirming to himself that there was nothing there. And then, the next thing you know, his back stiffened and his shoulders rose as he was saying to himself, well, if this is the way it's going to be. That's sort of how Liston was looked at the entirety of his career,
It's unfair. He just wasn't given the chance.
He wasn't, he never at any point in his life encountered his own version of Wiltwick, and boxing public, and especially the white boxing public, never really cared. As a whole, I'm sure there were plenty of fans who did have some empathy, but as a whole, the public never took a step back to think, why do you think he ended up this way based on like the conditions that black folks are living through? No, never thought about that. Always hated him, reviled him, didn't like him at all. Whereas Floyd Patterson lived until 2006. Liston actually died only a few years later in 1979 from a heroin...
71.
Oh, sorry, yeah, 1971. I don't know how to read. Liston died in 1971 from a heroin overdose that may have been due to foul play. And so just to kind of close the book on that, before the first fight between Patterson and Liston, James Baldwin actually met with both fighters and wrote about it. And it's actually a really charming, really good short story. I'd highly recommend if you're able to read it. I think it's available for free online. If you can ever find it, it's very good because Baldwin, he's not much of a sports guy, but his ability to understand the psychology of the people he's talking to is incredible. And so he was taken with Floyd Patterson, and he was rooting for Patterson. But he also really liked Sonny Liston. This is just a small little part of a passage of how he described Liston. While there is a great deal of violence in him, I sense no cruelty at all. Anyone who cared to could turn him into taffy. I think another part of the quote said he was tough to mask his lack of cruelty in order to get by in this world. But he goes on to say, it seems to me that he has suffered a great deal. It is in his face, in the silence of that face, and in the curiously distant light in the eyes. A light which rarely signals because there have been so few answering signals.
That's just not fair.
It's really not,
It really does, again, highlight that if given the opportunity to give people a chance, they can turn it around.
Yeah.
But especially with the black citizens of our country, we have no interest in doing that.
Yeah, exactly. But to pick it up a little bit, so now on to, the greatest.
The man needs no introduction.
but we're gonna give it to him anyway.
He floats like a butterfly.
He stings like a bee.
He is the greatest boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali.
I was gonna say Canelo Alvarez.
I mean, I'm
just
being
kidding.
half Mexican. I'm contractually obligated to agree with you, but I mean, I got to go with my boy Ali here.
Nobody has ever combined the showman who can back it up. Every arrogant fighter in your entire life that you've ever watched who tries to walk that line is just a pale imitation of Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
The Thrilla in Manila.
So, Cameron, who did Muhammad Ali get influence from?
Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson. What?
Just to bring this all full circle, he also very heavily took from a big professional wrestler at the time named Gorgeous George.
Yes. Yeah, he was a hybrid of Jack Johnson and Gorgeous George, basically.
But his name was not Muhammad Ali.
He was actually born Cassius Clay.
Yep. Born
In-
Cassius Clay, January 17th, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky. And, you know, his style, he was light on his feet, very quick for a heavyweight. And, yeah, again, so he was really influenced by Jack Johnson. Actually, the practice of following people around, basically talking shit until they got annoyed enough to accept a fight, was something that he got from him.
That's something I would totally do.
Oh, yeah, you would 100% do that. And so he originally converted to Islam in 1961 after attending a Nation of Islam meeting, although he didn't join yet because actually the Nation of Islam didn't want a boxer at first to be like a prominent part of their ranks.
I get it. It's the whole thing about violence, stuff like that. But religions kind of take a
They take a front row seat in violence. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like history. It's like it's like
Wait, are you telling me there have been instances of violence from religion during history?
never.
no. I digress.
That's never happened. We're not saying that. Everything's always peaceful. Anyway, continue.
So 1961 converts to Islam, still Cassius Clay though. Next year, 1962.
I thought you said like 1961 converted to Islam. Like
the year
entire
1961 just converted to
so
Islam.
1961 converted to Islam. I was like, well, damn, that year took a hard. That year went fucking crazy.
1962 was pagan. 1963 was Shinto.
Zoroastrian.
That was 1964.
And then in 1965, it had its awkward atheist stage.
Yeah, it's like angry teen atheist
There's
stage.
Nietzschean Nietzschean wilderness mode.
So the next year, 1962, he meets Malcolm X, who kind of becomes a sort of religious political mentor. They're basically BFFs. 2 years after that, he beats our friend Sonny Liston at the age of 22. So not the youngest ever heavyweight champion, because again, Patterson was 21, but pretty close to it.
He was the youngest to take the title from the previous champion, whereas Floyd Patterson won it when it was vacant.
That is true. Patterson did win it from a tournament where he beat the ever crafty Archie Moore.
Both those records are the ones that Mike Tyson would defeat.
Yeah, he would just consolidate that record into one because at 20 years old, he was a wrecking machine.
I mean, now Ethereus, man.
So after he gets the title, all of a sudden, the Nation of Islam is totally cool with a boxer in their ranks.
There's a lot of good that comes out of the Nation of Islam, but they also counter that by being kind of sneaky and kind of bad, and also it's quite possibly, allegedly, that they might have had something to do with Malcolm X's death.
It seems pretty likely.
That's as far as we can go as our lawyers are concerned.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, I'm definitely not going to dig too deep into the Nation of Islam, of course, when, like, even their shady and bad stuff is responsible for only a fraction of the harm inflicted by, like,
The
greater
FBI.
institute. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that being said, you know, there's kind of a reason Malcolm X, who just had amazing politics, has a split with the Nation of Islam. So anyways, we don't want to spoon feed to you exactly what you have to think about the Nation of Islam or anything, but
COINTELPRO sucks.
Anyway, after Ali becomes the heavyweight champ, he converts fully to become part of the Nation of Islam and changes his name to Muhammad Ali. This also causes a split with Malcolm X, who had actually left the Nation of Islam only a couple weeks after Muhammad Ali joined. So, I mean, this split is a bummer, and actually, Ali would say later in life that this was one of his biggest regrets of his entire life, if not the biggest. Because, I mean, when you're faced with choosing between Malcolm X and anyone else,
Malcolm X, you really had to, like, there was really a choice between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad.
you're going with Malcolm X, or like you should. But, I mean, he's 22 at the time, and 90% of his life is spent in a boxing ring, and so it's like, I get it. If I was 22 and had no life experience beyond boxing, I probably wouldn't make the wisest choices either. But anyway,
This actually makes the turn to Muhammad Ali becoming one of the most fascinating characters of the civil rights era.
yes, because, you know, whatever we may think about the Nation of Islam, he does one very cool thing where he refuses to be drafted 2 years later in 1966.
He has a great quote that we can't say because we're all a bunch of white boys.
Yeah. He has some other good quotes that folks can say, but yes, we definitely won't say that one quote. And so not only did he refuse the draft, but he openly opposed the Vietnam War when it really was not popular to do so yet.
It doesn't really become unpopular until the 70s, basically.
Basically, yeah. And of course, it's a gradual process, but yeah,
What about the Kent State shooting though?
that helps make it less popular, but also in the same way in the modern
Because they were
day,
protesting the war at that time too.
They were
and-
starting to protest the war, but I mean, like, even amongst, like, yeah, there was, of course, there was protests of the war, but the protests were like a loud minority voice. It's
Yeah.
not until the 70s that the war starts becoming completely unpopular.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so Ali at this time, before it's cool, says, I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. And why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs and denied simple human rights? Which, shit, man, how do you argue with that?
You ain't wrong.
That was a mic drop.
Right? And of course, as we talked about in our episode about Dien Bien Phu, leading to the U.S. involvement in Vietnam, we were trying to undermine democracy there. So why would Muhammad Ali skip the fight for democracy for black folks in the U.S. to take away democracy from Vietnamese people? Very righteous decision, but also not popular, folks.
And it cost him.
Yep. And so he was stripped of his fighting license. Let's do some quick math here. He was born in 1942. This is happening in 1966. He's 24 years old, or 23 if he hasn't had a birthday, but I think he's
24.
Okay. So he has his boxing license stripped from him for the next 5 years.
He lost his prime.
He lost his prime from 24 to 29 years old.
Oh jeez, that sucks so bad.
Yep. And so he goes on a speaking tour around the U.S. during this time to, you know, voice his opposition to the war. Also helps him keep a high profile. Okay, so pop quiz time. Who penned an op-ed in favor of Muhammad Ali?
Howard Cosell.
No, although Howard Cosell was one of the only people who had his back, basically.
Stokely?
No, although that is an awesome choice. Actually, the answer is Floyd Patterson.
Word up.
The gentleman of boxing, dude. He's just such a nice guy.
He really lives up to that nickname.
He really does. And it's funny because, like, going into their first fight, Muhammad Ali had, like, called him an Uncle Tom and stuff like that. Really playing that up in the theater, the theatrical, like, experience of that marketing. But then, like, if he saw Patterson in private, he would just be like, oh, dude, what's up, my friend? Just, you know, super nice and stuff.
You know, Muhammad Ali knows people want drama. People crave drama. So you have to play the drama. You see it with wrestlers all the time. I know it's more scripted, so it's a little bit different. But, like, these guys are friends with each other, on the road with each other 300 days a year. They like each other, but you have to put this facade of, you're a piece of shit, I'm going to stop you.
Exactly. And, you know, in boxing, like, sometimes it really is real. But Ali did have, he had respect for Patterson, which, again, great boxer. And even though they did honestly not see eye to eye on civil rights, but he respected where he was coming from. And so Floyd Patterson, when everyone else is taking a shit on Ali, he writes an op-ed in defense of Muhammad Ali, who he was actually still calling Cassius Clay. From this op-ed, I think the Cassius Clay viewpoint is working against the civil rights movement and the best interests of the nation. I certainly would fight willingly in Vietnam for my country and have no soft feelings toward the black Muslims, which is what they called the Nation of Islam at the time. But what bothers me about Cassius Clay's situation is that he's being made to pay too stiff a penalty for saying and doing what he thinks is right. I happen to not agree with him, but he certainly has a right to express his opinion on Vietnam and the draft and the Muslims without having half the nation jumping on his back. Why? Because Clay was exercising his right of free speech. Fucking Floyd Patterson, dude. Gentleman of boxing. But fortunately, because, Vietnam just gradually became less and less popular, there was kind of more and more of a movement to be like, hey, like, what are y'all doing? Like, Ali should be allowed to box. This war is bullshit. So in 1971, the conviction was overturned by the Supreme Court, and he was allowed to box again. But to reiterate, he had lost his athletic prime.
That doesn't mean he was done, though.
No.
He's just getting started.
That's right. Oh, and also that doesn't mean he was done being watched by the U.S. either, because he was still being monitored by the NSA and FBI, just as a fun side note.
Of course.
So he had obviously a number of legendary fights.
The
Cameron,
Thriller Manila.
you want to talk about that?
Ali won. He beat Joe Frazier.
Yep, he beat Joe Frazier. He beat George Foreman. He beat a crazy number of some of the best heavyweight boxers of all time.
Mind you, he beat George Foreman, probably maybe the strongest puncher of all time.
And the maker of the greatest hamburger grills.
Who was able to come out of retirement at the age of 46 and become the oldest heavyweight champion of all time. And that guy he beat, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, said like it was weird because like you had George Foreman punch him and he's moving slower, but then he hits you. It's like getting hit by a bus.
Oh, man. Yeah, I would not ever want to be hit by Sonny Liston, George Foreman, or Mike Tyson. Or Deontay Wilder. No thank you, sir. Or if we're talking about MMA fighters, prime Alistair Overeem or current Francis Ngannou. I would not like to
Or even a half punch from Brock Lesnar.
Or
Oh, yeah, when he was juiced up Lesnar.
Or Rosenstruck.
Oh, jeez, dude, yeah. There's a long list of heavyweight fighters I would not like to get hit by. So he has this incredible career where, as like Nick said before, he regains the heavyweight title 3 times in total throughout.
I think that's the most. Is that? I can't remember.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I'm sure that no one's beaten it since. I don't know if someone has achieved that.
It's a little harder now because, there's the whole lineal champion and there's like the 7 different organizations that have their own champions. It's a little harder to...
Yeah, there's no unified title. So anyway, he also, of course, is still living a, we'll say, historically relevant life, right? 1972, he went on the Hajj to Mecca, the Hajj being the pilgrimage that Muslims go on to Mecca at least once in their life. And he had an experience similar to Malcolm X. That's really what started to kind of push him away from the anti-integrationist views of the Nation of Islam. And it should be said that like one of the ways that people describe Malcolm X's post-Mecca outlook is that he became more moderate, but it's not that he became more moderate per se. It's more so that he had more of a globalist perspective and felt more solidarity with all people and saw the struggle of black folks and other people of color and poor people in the U.S. as part of a greater global struggle for freedom. So that's what happened to Malcolm X, and that's also kind of what happened to Muhammad Ali in 72. So he started becoming more of a kind of global activist, citizen of the world. He marched for Native American rights in 1978. Started a number of charities, became outspoken about being like pro-Palestinian rights, but also had like, I guess you could say, friendly relations, or like he went on a couple diplomatic relation envoy trips or whatever you would call it to Israel. So just really like being connected to good causes in the world. By the end of his career, ended with a 56-5 record, which is really impressive. That's with having gone 1-3 in his last 4 fights, in which kind of everyone agreed that he shouldn't have really been fighting. So had he retired before that, he would have like half the number of losses basically. And he just basically had a post-boxing career of quiet dignity. He unfortunately got Parkinson's in 84, but he lived a while. And
Only died 2 years ago.
yeah, he really did not die that long ago at all. And he was just respected and beloved by everyone.
There's a reason why we call him the greatest.
Yeah. And Nick, didn't he like give a pep talk to the Padres who were like doing horribly and then they turned it around?
Yeah, their last good season, every time they invite somebody to give like a pep talk, like go get them kind of thing. In 2010, that speaker was Muhammad Ali, and they almost made the playoffs. They lost the playoff spot on the last day of the season. That was their last good season. Because when Muhammad Ali tells you go out there and fight, you fucking go out there and fight.
Yeah, you can't disappoint the greatest.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to sum up all of these stories we've told the last few episodes, how would you do it?
I guess, we think about how in our world there's politics, and then there's sports, and then there's science, and then there's this, and then there's that. But things are interconnected. And of course, even when figures in boxing or whatever other sport don't have quite the grandiose stories that we talked about here with people like, Ali, Johnson, Lewis, Patterson, there's still always politics. But, these stories I think serve as an especially big reminder to the fact that these boundaries between different things aren't always as firm as you think. And people's lives are multifaceted. You might be the greatest fighter in the world, but you can also be a black man, or you can even be an anti-fascist German. That's still part of who you are. And you can use your platform as a huge cultural figure to do some real good, even if it's in secret, like with Max Schmeling, or if it's in public, like Muhammad Ali resisting the draft.
One of the biggest important things I think in this too, in terms of like the black box we talked about, like they're trying to navigate their lives in America. How not only to be an athlete in the United States, but what it means to be a black person in the United States, and how to navigate a country in which doesn't like them based on the color of their skin, whether it's overt or covert.
Yeah.
And they're conveniently used as props at one point and then discarded at the next, like for example, like Floyd Patterson. Like JFK and Frank Sinatra kind of turning the back on him. And in the case with Schmeling, it's just like, it was hard to shake off like any fascist moniker when you're a German, but he's a humble guy. It took someone calling him a Nazi to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Like that's no. It's false. It's almost like the fact of like they're navigating worlds in which they are going against the current.
Yeah.
And in the case with Joe Louis and like Floyd Patterson, yeah, they're assimilating in a sense, like just trying to do what they can to be even keel.
Yeah, to at least not face as much shit as they would if they're more outspoken.
Yeah, and so it's almost like these guys are just like they're fighting against the current. It was basically like the civil rights era in sport. And in the case of Max Schmeling and being anti-German, and that pushback against fascism. In ways, they're kind of the pioneers of their positive social movements in the United States. Like that, for me, that's one of the things you take from it.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Cameron, do you want to tell the audience what they can look forward to next time?
So we are doing another mouthful of historical movies. We are going to be discussing the Battle of Algiers, directed by Gillo Pontecorvo. It is an Italian movie with French language, and it's about the Algerian War of Independence, the Algerian Resistance Movement. Algeria got their independence in 1962. But the movie was created in 1966. So this is 4 years after the movement. And I think that, Nick, you talked about the style in which it was directed. And
yeah, we'll get in more into that when we talk about the movie. This is where I actually get to bring in my bachelor's degree in film.
If you want to follow along, if you want to, audience to take your notes as well, it's on YouTube.
In its entirety.
In its entirety, subtitles.
It's in the public domain, so
like subtitles and everything. You can follow along. You can make your own opinions about it and your own critiques and your own summaries. But we will reconvene and we will discuss what we think of the movie ourselves in our next episode. So, if I steal this from Nick, thank you all for listening. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Give us a follow on Instagram. Any questions, comments, concerns, positive criticisms, you can always DM us on our social media pages.
And if you have anything negative to say, I just want to remind everyone to send that Nick's way.
Yeah,
he's used to it.
Feel free to reach out to us on, at least you can reach out to me on my private Twitter account. I'm cool with that.
If you have anything positive to say, make sure you direct it toward Cameron or I specifically.
Because we are fragile human beings and we need all the positivity we need. And if you follow us on Apple Podcasts, please give us a review.
Actually, please give us a review on whatever platform you follow us on.
If they allow reviews.
If they allow reviews, yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Peace.